Today, I'm having a drinking party at home with friends, so get things ready.
I received a text message from my husband, who has consistently had a bad attitude towards me while I'm bedridden with severe morning sickness. I quickly replied, "I can't do it, it's too sudden." I didn't get a response, so I tried calling, but my husband never answered. I had reached my limit. I won't forgive him for his previous attitude or for today's drinking party. I'm going to punish him. And then I put my plan into action. Around 6 p.m., my husband returned home with many footsteps behind him.
Hey, what are you doing sleeping? Didn't I tell you we're having a drinking party today? You haven't prepared anything at all.
Daryl came into my bedroom and yelled at me, and I answered him, dizzy and unable to get up. That's why I said it's impossible.
Hey, just get up. Hurry up and get out the booze.
I smiled in place and replied, "Is that all you want to say?" After that, my husband realized everything and began to tremble. My name is Katerina. I'm a 29-year-old working housewife. After graduating from the university's science department, I joined Norson, a small machinery manufacturer. Despite being small, it possesses a strong technical expertise and is a highly respected presence in the industry, with a high job acceptance rate. During the interview, Daniela, the female president and representative of the company, told me, "It's unusual for women to want to join our company. Your university grades are excellent. I've interviewed you and found you to be a great person, and I'd like to invite you to join our company." Oh, thank you so much. I will definitely strive to be of great value once I join. Work hard from now on, okay? From that moment, the president became my role model. In getting the job offer from Norson, which was my first choice, became the happiest event of my life. Working here was hard, but also fun. I wasn't underestimated because I was a woman, and I was entrusted with significant tasks, allowing me to see my skills improve over time. In my third year at the company, I was approached by Daryl, the sales department manager, at a social gathering.
Was there ever a girl like you in the R&D department? It's rare for a girl to join our company.
I was nervous as Daryl approached me in a casual manner. After all, he's the biological son of the president and the executive director. It's widely rumored within the company that he's the next successor. I was nervous talking to Daryl at the time, but for some reason he seemed to like me.
You're like a serious and modest person. Quite refreshing. Hey, how about going out for a meal next time?
Thus, Daryl and I started going out to dinner together. Daryl has a liberal arts degree, which is unusual for our company, and he is a good communicator. He seemed to have a personality suited to sales. In fact, he seemed pretty good at his job. Daryl's lighthearted, or rather cheerful personality was also refreshing to me. They say people are drawn to what they don't have, and I was no exception. We dated for about a year and a half, and eventually Daryl proposed to me.
Katerina, let's get married. Please accept my proposal.
Daryl, thank you. I'm very happy. I happily accepted the ring that Daryl offered. As I gazed at it with delight, Daryl teasingly said,
"By the way, isn't this what they call a Cinderella story? Marrying the future company president?"
Well, I'm not marrying you just because you're the president's son.
Oh, that's right, isn't it? Well, from now on, please take care of me, Katerina.
Afterward, we first went to meet my parents. My rural parents were delighted and gave their approval for the marriage. Next, it was time to visit Daryl's parents. The president, or rather my mother-in-law, beamed at me. "I remember you from the interview, and I've heard that you're competent within the company. Bringing home someone like that as your wife is quite a catch, Daryl." My father-in-law also welcomed me with a quiet smile and gave his approval for the marriage. After some small talk, my mother-in-law suddenly turned serious. "Katerina, I'm thinking of making Daryl the next successor, but he has a bit of a carefree side to him, so I want you to educate him." "Come on, Mom." "You too, Daryl. Having a family means you
have more to be protective. It won't be business as usual. Treat Katerina well. I understand.
Mom, Dad, I look forward to your support from now on. I greeted them in this way. A while later, we had our wedding. We invited all the employees and had a grand celebration. Later, my mother-in-law presented us with a gift for our wedding. We began living together in a single-family house. I thought that our happy married life was about to begin, but I soon encountered a problem. Daryl was the type who didn't do any household chores. He had experience living on his own, so he should have been capable. But he didn't even press a button on the washing machine. While I was doing all the household work, he would lie on the sofa watching TV. I also had my job to attend to, so taking on all the household chores was honestly a burden. When I lived alone, I could get away with making a simple dinner and doing the cleaning on the weekend, but it was different when living with a husband. After 3 months of living like that, with only me doing the housework, I finally complained to Daryl. Hey, Daryl, I have a favor to ask. Can you help out a bit more with household chores? Daryl, without taking his eyes off the TV, responded like this.
Huh? Can't you just keep doing the chores like before? I'm tired from work.
I work too. It's not fair that I'm the only one responsible for household chores. This is unreasonable.
What's unreasonable about it? I'm the next company president, you know. Are you suggesting that such an important figure should do household chores? That's what's unreasonable.
I was left speechless. Regardless of whether Daryl would become the next company president or not, isn't family separate from work? When I tried to convey this, Daryl's expression soured.
Katerina, you came here as a bride, right? Household chores should be done by women.
Was this his true opinion? I was in shock at his outdated statement, and Daryl casually said,
Right, I'm inviting friends over from now. Do we have any alcohol?
What? From now?
Make sure you can entertain my friends properly. You're my wife, after all.
My concern wasn't just that my husband wouldn't help with household chores. Daryl frequently invited his college friends over to our house for parties. Each time I had to prepare alcohol and food, and my precious leisure time was being taken away. I understood that Daryl had his social connections and valued his friends, but honestly, dealing with this every week was exhausting. About a year into our marriage, I started experiencing health issues. I felt dizzy and had mild nausea that persisted. I decided to go to the hospital thinking it might be something serious. To my surprise, I was informed that I was pregnant. Overjoyed, I shared the news with my husband, and he was equally thrilled.
Katerina, is it a boy or a girl?
You're getting ahead of yourself, Daryl.
But I'm really looking forward to it. I'm so happy.
I genuinely felt glad to see the happiness on my husband's face. After that, we shared the news of my pregnancy with my in-laws who live nearby, and they were even happier than Daryl.
Congratulations, Katerina. Take good care of your health. If there's anything we can do, just let us know.
Thank you, Mom. At that moment, my father-in-law said to Daryl,
Daryl, from now on, make sure to support Katerina. Reduce those drinking parties and come back home early to be by her side. I understand, Dad.
It seemed that Daryl had a hard time saying no to my in-laws. Since he seemed so amenable, I thought everything would be fine. However, Daryl continued to have parties with friends at the same pace as before. I asked him to stop inviting friends to our home during this critical time. He stopped inviting friends to our home, but he began going to bars instead. Each time he would come home late at night heavily intoxicated. I was becoming frustrated, but I didn't say anything. After a while, my morning sickness became severe. I was dizzy all day and vomited multiple times. Even the slightest strong smell would make me throw up. Whether I ate or not, I couldn't avoid vomiting up stomach acid. In this state, it was impossible for me to work, and gradually I couldn't go to work at all. One day, while taking a half day off and resting at home, I received a message from my mother-in-law.
Katerina, I asked your boss about your condition. It seems your morning sickness is quite severe.
Yes, it's true. I'm really sorry that I can't work properly.
It's all right. How about taking a leave of absence until your morning sickness settles, or better yet, until you give birth?
A leave of absence?
Yes, your health is essential right now. Don't worry, your place is secure, and this would be the best choice for the time being.
Thank you, Mom. No, thank you, President. I'll do that. So it was decided that I would take a leave of absence until giving birth. When I informed Daryl about this, he frowned.
Huh? A leave of absence due to morning sickness? I've never heard of that.
It can't be helped. I'm genuinely not feeling well.
But never mind. Since you're not going to work, at least make sure the household chores are perfect, alright?
Huh? I was surprised, and Daryl continued.
Of course. Lately you've been slacking with meals, right? I've noticed.
But I'm trying my best. I'm doing everything I can because strong smells make me nauseous.
How can you have a child like that? Since you're in a housewife-like situation now, make sure the household chores are perfect. Got it?
Ordinarily, when a wife is suffering from morning sickness, a husband in the right mind would help with chores or bring her suitable food. But Daryl didn't do any of that. Instead, he went out drinking almost every night and ordered me to maintain perfect housekeeping while I could hardly stand. I was deeply disappointed by Daryl's attitude. Weeks passed, but my morning sickness didn't subside. It actually peaked. During that time, Daryl returned home once again heavily intoxicated. He didn't even take off his suit and started snoring on the sofa. I sighed and began cleaning up the mess my husband had made. I picked up a phone from the floor and saw the screen. There was a text message that went like this. Daryl, thanks for coming to the bar again today. I'll be waiting for you tomorrow. The sender's name is Jasmine. It's clear from this message that Daryl has become quite close to the bartender. I felt my anger rising. How could he flirt with a bartender while I was suffering from morning sickness? I thought about waking Daryl up, but he was deep asleep, so I gave up for the day. Instead, I took a screenshot of the message. A week later, the morning sickness was particularly bad and I was down for the morning. Then I got a call from Daryl in the evening.
Today I'm having a drinking party at home with friends, so get ready.
I quickly replied that it was impossible. When I didn't get a response, I called him, but he didn't answer. I had reached my limit. He didn't understand how severe my morning sickness was, and he wanted to have a gathering at our home after spending time at a bar. I couldn't let this go. I decided to teach him a lesson. I contacted someone, and around 6 p.m., Daryl returned home with a group of friends.
Hey, why are you sleeping? I told you we're having a gathering today. You haven't prepared anything.
He came to the bedroom and shouted at me. I, dizzy from my morning sickness, responded, I messaged you. I can't do it today because my morning sickness is really bad. At least go out and have a drink.
What's with all this morning sickness all the time? Don't be so whiny.
I told you. It's impossible.
Come on, get up. Serve some snacks with the drinks.
I smiled in place and replied, Is that the only thing you have to say?
Huh? What are you talking about?
Daryl seemed annoyed and grabbed my arm, trying to pull me out of bed. Suddenly, the closet door in the bedroom creaked open.
What? Mom? Dad too?
That's when my father-in-law and mother-in-law, whom I had invited, emerged from the closet. Their faces were beet red, and they had their arms crossed.
What? Why are my parents here? What's going on?
Realizing he had been overheard, Daryl began to tremble uncontrollably. Then my mother-in-law calmly said, Tell your friends to leave immediately.
But...
Do it now. Daryl shrank and sent his friends home, leaving only my husband and me with my in-laws. Daryl, sit there. My mother-in-law said sharply, and Daryl with a pale face sat down. My father-in-law continued with a low voice.
I've told you multiple times to take care of Katerina while she's pregnant. What the heck is this? Dad, listen. Today was just a one-time thing.
My mother-in-law then interjected.
I've heard everything from Katerina. You've been going out drinking almost every day since you found out she was pregnant. I even saw your messages. You knew about all of that?
You admit it, don't you? And inviting many friends over while your pregnant wife was bedridden due to morning sickness, and then telling her to prepare snacks? Who do you think you are? Watching Daryl shrink under my mother-in-law's scolding, I almost burst into laughter.
Start by apologizing to Katerina,
my father-in-law said sharply, and Daryl bowed his head to me.
Katerina, I'm sorry for everything, but I was genuinely happy about the baby. That's the truth. And about the drinking gatherings, my friends invited me, saying they wanted to celebrate the pregnancy.
No more excuses, my mother-in-law shouted, and Daryl bowed his head to me again, tears in his eyes.
I'm sorry, Katerina. Please forgive me. I promise to be a better husband from now on.
My mother-in-law sighed. I never thought you could be such a fool. I will respect Katerina's decision regarding the future, but we'll drop the talk of you becoming the heir.
What? Mom, you can't.
Be silent. All you can do is follow Katerina's decisions. All three of them turned their attention towards me, and I quietly said, Daryl, I'll spare you from divorce, but until the child is born, we'll be living separately.
Separation?
Mom, Dad, could you please help educate Daryl until then? Upon my request, my in-laws nodded vigorously.
Katerina, thank you for not divorcing our foolish son. We'll straighten him out ourselves. Yes, maybe we should make him a monk or something. What? A monk? Please have mercy.
With a pitiful voice, Daryl was led away by his parents. I waved to them with a smile. As promised, afterward, Daryl and I lived separately. He was forced to do all the housework at his in-laws' house and was strictly disciplined by his parents. And it seems like he really was made to have a monk's haircut, too. Later, Daryl contacted me repeatedly for help, but I ignored him. A few months later, with the help of my in-laws, I gave birth safely. A sweet little boy was born. When Daryl was allowed to meet him, he quietly shed tears. Now, Daryl and I are living together again. He's become a different person, coming home early, helping with household chores and childcare. He's working hard to regain recognition as the heir apparent.
I'm sorry for what I did back then. I was truly at fault.
He apologized, with his head lowered. While forgiving him, I made it clear that I would be taking the lead from now on. My in-laws have always supported me and showered love on their grandchild. I'm grateful for them, and I want to continue living happily as a family.
My cheating husband forced me to do childcare, chores, and parental care before abandoning my son and me. His sins return.
This means caregivers are not needed anymore. Leave because I'm going to live with her.
This was what my husband, who had returned home drunk as usual, said. Until now, he had pushed the care of his parents on me and didn't care about the family. Seeing him acting so selfishly, I was left speechless. What's more, I was half forcibly driven out of the house. As I stood there in bewilderment, holding my son's hand, my son tearfully said to me, "Mom, it's going to be okay. I'll take care of that guy." 15 years later, my son smiled at me.
Mom, I kept my promise.
As a result of my son keeping his promise to me, my ex-husband ended up in a terrible situation. My name is Violet. I'm a 36-year-old office worker. I live with my husband, Dean, and son, Trevor. Dean and I were college classmates, and we became close after attending the same seminar. We continued our relationship after graduating from college and got married a few years later. As a couple, we have been together since our college days, so there's no longer excitement or the feeling of butterflies in stomachs. However, I felt a sense of comfort in being able to maintain a friendship like relationship indefinitely. I got pregnant shortly after getting married and gave birth to our son Trevor. Both Dean and I were completely smitten with our son. Furthermore, Dean suggested,
"Let's buy a bigger house for our growing family."
And so we bought the house. I felt an almost frightening level of happiness, like something out of a movie. I wish this happiness could last forever. However, this happy life would gradually begin to crumble. One day, Dean suddenly said,
"I need to take care of my parents, so they will be living with us."
I was shocked by the suddenness of this. "Even if you say that suddenly, are your parents okay with it?" That's all I could say. However, Dean simply replied,
"I've already made up my mind,"
and started watching TV. He had always been a bit domineering from the beginning of our relationship. Once he decided something, he wouldn't listen to anyone, so he would proceed with the discussion about living together on his own. I felt that arguing any further would be pointless, so I reluctantly accepted the idea of living together. Fortunately, both of my in-laws were good people and treated Trevor kindly. My mother-in-law even apologized to me, saying, "I'm sorry for the abrupt decision. I even considered a senior care facility, but Dean insisted on taking care of us at our house because it's his childhood home." I still think it was Dean's own decision. But even when we started living with his in-laws, Dean didn't help with caregiving.
"Caring for her husband's parents is the wife's job."
That was his argument. Things started feeling a bit strange since he unilaterally decided on living with his parents. Despite being somewhat domineering, he had generally been kind, but gradually his words and attitudes towards me became colder.
"Hey, hasn't my shirt been ironed yet? Make sure you do it by tomorrow. Last night's dinner, the meat was too scarce. You should know my taste better."
He started to complain about various small things that he had never mentioned before, one after another. His change in attitude wasn't limited to just me. He became colder towards Trevor, whom he had adored. In the past, when Trevor returned from school,
"Did something fun happen at school?"
I used to listen to him, asking questions like that. However, when Trevor tried to speak to him, "Dad, something happened at school today," Dean would respond,
"Shut up. I'm watching soccer now. Don't bother me,"
he said coldly. As such things continued, Trevor became completely withdrawn, no longer initiating conversations with Dean. I felt sorry for Trevor and made an effort to listen to my son's stories, no matter how busy I was. However, I also had a job to attend to. Balancing work, house chores, child rearing, and caregiving was quite challenging. Naturally, I couldn't provide care for my in-laws while at work. So there were days when I had to rely on a caregiver during my working hours. On the days when the caregiver didn't come, I rushed home during my work breaks to provide care for my in-laws. Afterward, I managed to handle all the household chores for everyone. Every day I was completely exhausted. And to be honest, I was quite drained. During this time, Dean started going out to drink more frequently, and he began to come home reeking of alcohol and perfume. If you have time to go out drinking so often, can't you help with the household chores? In response, my husband shouted angrily,
"Shut up. Men have social obligations, you know."
"You say it's a social obligation, but you didn't go out this often before, right? Besides, the decision to live with your parents was something you decided on your own, so shouldn't you cooperate a little?"
"I've been saying it for a while. Housework, childcare, and taking care of my parents are the wife's responsibilities."
At this rate, the argument between Dean and I was unbearable. There's nothing more harmful to a child than seeing their parents argue. I tried to express my opinions to Dean when Trevor was asleep, and I avoided complaining about him in front of our son. However, Trevor was already 10 years old. He must have sensed various things. One day, Trevor said these kind words to me. "Mom, are you okay? You seem a little down lately." Is it hard to take care of Grandma and Grandpa? If there's anything I can do to help, I'll help too, okay? Trevor's words almost brought me tears, but I couldn't show my weakness. Thank you, Trevor. You're so kind, but don't worry about me. Was school fun today? I tried to keep the conversation light so as not to burden my son. For Trevor's sake, and for my own, I had to stay strong. I reminded myself of this every day. Meanwhile, Dean's behavior took a turn for the worse. He began going to drinking parties more frequently, sometimes not coming home for days. He even stopped contributing to the household finances. I had reached my breaking point. Something had to change. Just as I was contemplating this, my in-laws' health deteriorated, and they passed away one after another. It was as if my father-in-law was chasing after my late mother-in-law. Caring for them had been challenging, but losing my kind in-laws filled Trevor and me with sadness. Even in times like these, Dean continued to go out drinking and didn't even help prepare for the funerals. I reluctantly took charge of the funeral preparations. Things finally came to an end, and one day while I was at home resting, the kind-hearted Trevor approached me.
"Mom, you've worked so hard,"
he said, patting my shoulder. At that moment, Dean returned home, and he seemed drunk again. I had a bad feeling about this. "Trevor, go to your room." I told him to stay in his room. Dean stood in front of me and abruptly said,
"Now, we don't need any more caregivers. The only reason I haven't divorced you until now is because I needed someone to care for them."
Huh? What do you mean by don't need?
Exactly what it sounds like. I'm going to live here with my new girlfriend, and we'll get married soon. You both need to leave.
What is this all of a sudden? Do you even know what you're talking about? I was in disbelief. Dean had always been selfish, and I couldn't contain my anger at his words. However, Dean continued without regard for my feelings.
"I don't love you guys anymore. Besides, my new girlfriend is pregnant. I'm going to build a happy home with my new family. I have no choice, so I'll pay you some alimony."
And just like that, I was forcefully kicked out of the house. Trevor, who had heard the commotion, rushed after me. Dean threw my bag and belongings out of the house and said,
"Goodbye."
With a single word, he closed the door. In the end, I had no choice but to leave the house with Trevor. Holding my son's hand, I was at a loss for what to do next. I had a job, but my parents lived far away, and I couldn't rely on them. Above all, I was anxious about whether I could support Trevor on my own. Trevor, tears streaming down his face, said, "Mom, I've got your back. I'm going to make that guy pay for what he did to me right now." I hugged Trevor, and we both cried by the roadside. At that time, I couldn't have imagined that Trevor would turn those words into reality. Since leaving home with Trevor, I had been working hard to raise him. I had a full-time job, but being a single mother wasn't easy. I was determined not to burden Trevor with my struggles. Fortunately, Trevor grew up to be a kind and upright young man.
"Mom, I made curry today."
"Really? You made it all by yourself? Were you okay?"
"Yeah, I was careful with handling the stove."
"Thank you, Trevor." My son helped with household chores to ease my busy schedule. "Trevor, I know you're busy with your studies, so you don't have to overexert yourself."
"I'm okay. I pay attention in class and try to finish my homework during lunch breaks."
Thus, Trevor and I spent our days helping one another and cooperating with each other. Time flew by and Trevor successfully entered university, graduated, and started his career.
"I'm planning to work as an employee for just 1 year to gain experience, and then I'll start my own business."
He was enthusiastic about it, and indeed, 1 year later, he fulfilled his words and established his company. It was remarkable that the once small Trevor had become the president of a company. I was proud of myself at the same time and relieved that my work as a mother was over. Even after becoming a company president, my son continued to live with me. Trevor, you might find a girlfriend soon and want to move out. It's okay, you know. I told him this, but he responded with reassuring words.
Not right now. I'm still here by your side, so don't worry.
Trevor remained the same as when he was a child, always saying kind words to me. We were living peacefully together until one day.
Mom, I have something to tell you,
he said to me. I wondered if he had a girlfriend and was going to announce his engagement. However, what Trevor had to say was unexpected.
Mom, it took me a little longer, but I finally got back at him.
Huh? I had no idea what he was talking about. Got back at him? What do you mean? Then Trevor explained.
I got back at that awful man who tormented you.
At that moment, the face of a man came to my mind, and it was the face of my ex-husband, Dean. That man? You mean your father? What do you mean by got back at him? Trevor slowly began to tell me the story. Trevor had just recently started his own company, and thankfully the business was doing really well, experiencing rapid growth. During this time, he coincidentally received a business proposal from my ex-husband's company. It was true that Trevor had established a company similar to Dean's. For the business negotiations, Trevor asked Dean to participate along with some of the company's supervisory staff. Several of the supervisory staff had confused expressions, but it seemed that they included Dean at the request of the client company's president, who had a strong preference for it. Dean, who was somewhat oblivious, was initially pleased because he had heard about the positive feedback on his sales performance. However, when he saw Trevor's face during the business negotiation, he reportedly turned pale rapidly. He knew that his son had the same name, but he never imagined that the son he abandoned 15 years ago would become the president of the company he was dealing with. Even during the discussion, Dean couldn't stop sweating. The compliance officers repeatedly warned him, saying,
"What's wrong with you? Pay attention."
However, Trevor didn't mention Dean for any length of time. Dean was clearly relieved, apparently. Finally, Trevor had this to say.
Now, I'll ask you one last question. Is it correct that your company tolerates infidelity between employees?
At that moment, the room fell silent. The supervisory officers looked baffled, and Dean began to sweat once again. He couldn't help but say,
"Let's stop talking about matters unrelated to the business,"
he shouted. And this surprised the supervisory officers, who asked in response,
"What? What's the matter with you all of a sudden? And what's this talk about, Mr. President? In our company, such actions are strictly prohibited. We absolutely do not tolerate such behavior."
Then Trevor looked at Dean.
"But what about Mr. Turner over there?"
It seems like the supervisory officers were confused, and the director asked,
"And? What about him?" "And Mr. Turner is my biological father. During my childhood, he had an affair with another woman, which led to him kicking my mother and me out of the house. He never paid a cent in child support or alimony."
Then Dean banged his desk and got up.
"Mr. President, there are certain things you can and can't say. I'll sue you for defamation without any evidence, you know."
However, Trevor remained calm and ignored his outburst.
"You've married your mistress and had children, haven't you? And now you're having an affair with one of your company's secretaries, aren't you?"
With that, Trevor laid out the photographic evidence on his desk. Upon seeing these photos, the supervisory officers turned pale.
What are you doing?"
They all glared at Dean, and they began to apologize profusely.
"I'm sorry. We will take appropriate action on this matter. So can we please consider it separate from our business negotiations?"
Thus, the meeting was temporarily adjourned. Dean was led away by the supervisory officers, but before he left, he shouted at Trevor.
Trevor, I'm your father. Do you think it's okay to do this?
He kept shouting until the end, it seems. After hearing from my son, I was in a state of shock. I couldn't believe something like that had happened. So I voiced the question that was on my mind. But why did you know that your father was cheating or not paying child support or alimony? And I never told you about the affair. I even lied about how much money I received from your father to make sure you didn't feel unloved. I never talked about your father's terrible behavior. You might have had a hunch, but I made sure not to discuss such things with you.
Well, I was about 10 years old back then, so I somehow understood it. Plus, I happened to find your old diary.
Huh? Diary?
Yeah, and it had this written in it. I have proof of the affair, but I don't want to cause Trevor any more grief. I decided to forget about it.
In fact, at the time, I had evidence that Dean was having an affair. I could have demanded compensation from the woman he had an affair with. However, I only wanted to think about the future with Trevor. I didn't want to become a vengeful person, demanding compensation from the other woman or pressuring Dean for child support, showing that side to Trevor. So I chose to give up on all of those claims. I was in disbelief that Trevor knew about those things. To which Trevor continued.
It took time to get back at that man, but now it's okay. I put him through hell instead of you doing it, Mom. You might not have wished for revenge, but I couldn't forgive him.
I burst into tears at the thought of Trevor. Thank you, Trevor. Having said that, I held my son's hand. Afterward, it seems that Dean received a demotion and was transferred to a rural area as a result of this incident. The rumors of his affair with the secretary were known even in his new post, and it seems he felt uncomfortable there. Furthermore, his current wife discovered the affair, leading to a divorce and demands for alimony. Now he is working alone in an unfamiliar place, struggling to pay alimony. It appears that even the secretary, his affair partner, left the company promptly, showing that she might not have been genuinely serious about him. On the other hand, Trevor and I continued to enjoy peaceful days together. After hearing about Dean's downfall, his name was never brought up between Trevor and me. I had put that man behind me and looked forward to enjoying life with Trevor from now on.
After 3 years of marriage and pregnant, my husband called me a parasite, denied me living expenses, and stole my savings. I made him pay.
3 years into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. As a freelancer, I hadn't had income for a while, so I had to ask my husband to help with our living expenses. And then, my husband said this, looking down on me.
I won't give any money to a useless parasite like you.
What?
I won't be contributing to our living expenses anymore. You will have to manage with your own money.
And that's how my husband really stopped providing for my living expenses. Not only did he stop giving me money for groceries, but he also didn't contribute a single cent towards rent and utility bills. What's worse, he finally also started dipping into my savings for my single days. I won't forgive him. I will make him regret this. And so, my retaliation began. My name is Serena Ferguson. I'm a 30-year-old working wife. I met my husband Jonathan when I was single and working at a design company. I joined the company as a designer, and Jonathan worked in sales. We became close as we worked on several projects together. After being invited by Jonathan to have a few meals together, we started dating. In our second year of dating, Jonathan proposed to me.
Serena, will you marry me? I will definitely make you happy.
Jonathan, thank you. Of course I will marry you. As I gazed at the ring he had just given me, Jonathan said,
There is one thing I'd like to ask.
What is it?
After we get married, could you quit your job? It would be awkward for us to work at the same company as a married couple, don't you think?
I was taken aback. At that time, I was at the high point in my career as a designer, and I was considered a valuable asset at the company. I enjoyed my work and felt fulfilled, so I couldn't accept his request right away. But I want to keep working even after we get married.
In that case, why don't you switch to a different company or become a freelancer? Come on, Serena, please.
Well, I understand. And that's how I ended up leaving my job at the company. My boss at the time, Michelle, who was a good friend of mine, and others were sorry to see me go. On my last day of work, Serena, it's sad to part ways even though we've been working hard together. I feel the same way. Let's stay in touch, and we can go out for a meal sometime. I too left my job with a heavy heart because deep down, I wanted to stay at the company. We then rented an apartment near Jason's office, and our married life began. Upon getting married, I decided to become a freelancer working from home. When I informed Jonathan about this, he said the following.
Oh, being a freelancer is fine, but remember, we agreed to split the living expenses evenly.
We had discussed this before getting married, that we would both work and split the household expenses. However, it was at Jonathan's request that I quit my job and had to start from scratch to find clients. That being said, could you consider giving me a bit more until my job stabilizes? Since I have no income from the company now, and I will need to start looking for work from scratch. Even after I said this, Jonathan only made a displeased face.
Huh? Don't be so dependent. Are you trying to rely on me like that? I like the independent you know.
I understand. In this way, I ended up shouldering half of the household expenses, even during difficult times. Fortunately, I received a severance package, so I continued to break into my savings to supplement the household budget. Jonathan should have been earning sufficient income, yet he only contributed exactly half of his salary to the household. Even though the household's expenses are shared, he didn't do any chores. So as a result, I automatically took on all of the household chores. I managed to handle household chores in between my busy work schedule. And so, on a certain day in the 3rd year of our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. It was a surprising and joyful moment, as we had been having trouble conceiving. On the night when the pregnancy was confirmed at the OBGYN clinic, I told Jonathan, "Hey Jonathan, I think I'm having a baby."
What? Seriously? I'm so happy.
My husband smiled again and expressed his joy. I hadn't felt true happiness in a long time. However, right after that, a problem arose. My morning sickness was quite severe. I felt like I had motion sickness all day long and rushed to the toilet daily. I couldn't do my job properly, so I reluctantly had to stop all of my work. I went days without eating properly, lying on the floor. In the midst of this, Jonathan came home and called out to me as I lay in bed.
Hey, Serena, what about today's meal?
With the aroma of food wafting around, it's impossible for me, who is suffering, to prepare a meal. I'm sorry. I haven't been able to make food because I'm not feeling well due to morning sickness.
Huh? What are you doing? Preparing your husband's meal is also a wife's duty, right?
I'm sorry. Could you bear with frozen food for today? When I said that, Jonathan responded with annoyance.
Frozen food? I don't want to eat that crap. I'm going out to eat.
With that, Jonathan left without even asking about my meal. No words of sympathy. and he wouldn't do any housework either. I was growing increasingly frustrated with a husband who lacked understanding about my morning sickness, and his troublesome behavior didn't end there. One night, while I was lying down with a pale face due to nausea, Jonathan whispered in my ear,
"Hey, Serena, isn't it about time?"
Ignoring me, he tried to touch my body. I instantly grabbed his hand to stop him.
"What's wrong? Not allowed?"
Of course not. It's still early in the pregnancy, and you don't understand how tough the morning sickness is. I calmly told him this, but it seemed to make Jonathan angry.
"What's the matter? Taking care of your husband is wife's duty, isn't it?"
There is such a thing as timing and appropriateness. Haven't I complained multiple times about how hard morning sickness is?
"Come on, you sit there for a moment."
Jonathan's words were so harsh that I woke up with a start. My husband crossed his arms and stared at me.
"Are you using morning sickness as an excuse to slack off on various things?"
Even if you say that, I can't eat properly, you know.
Pregnancy isn't an illness, you know. It doesn't give you the right to neglect household chores or the wife's role.
I couldn't help but get upset at his way of speaking. And yet, you, Jonathan, don't lift a finger to help with the housework. You, as a husband, aren't covering for your wife who is suffering during pregnancy. What about that?
What? You want to argue with me?
But I finally couldn't hold back my tears. Seeing me looking down and sniffing my nose, Jonathan clicked his tongue.
"That's enough. I'm not coming home today."
Huh? It's already late at night. Where are you going at this hour?
"Anywhere is fine. I don't want to see your face."
He slammed the door shut with a loud noise. On that day, Jonathan truly didn't return. Later, my morning sickness subsided, but there was an awkward atmosphere between me and my husband. However, I had something to tell Jonathan. Due to the time I took off for morning sickness, my income had significantly decreased, making it difficult to contribute the same amount to our living expenses. With hesitation, I talked to my husband. "You know, Jonathan, there is something I need to talk to you about." I told him that I'd like him to wait for a while regarding the living expenses, and during that time, I needed his support. In response, Jonathan said this with a blank expression.
"Are you saying you can't contribute to the living expenses because of morning sickness?"
Yes, I'm a freelancer, and there's not much I can do about it, right? I'm going to be working again when the baby is born. So I was wondering if I could ask for some money to live on until then. In response, Jonathan said this while looking down on me.
"I'm not giving money to a useless parasite like you."
What?
"I won't contribute to the living expenses anymore. So figure it out with your own money."
What? What are you saying? I'm pregnant, and the baby is going to be born soon. Jonathan sighed at my plea.
"If you don't want to be called useless, you better work hard with that big belly. Don't rely on me. I have no obligation to take care of the parasite like you." Ha!
And so, Jonathan indeed stopped providing for the living expenses. Not a single cent for food, let alone rent and utilities. I had no choice but to dip into my business savings to make ends meet. While enduring this difficult life, I worked hard for the sake of our unborn child, even though my pregnancy was progressing. Aside from the business savings, I had about $50,000 in savings from my single days, but I didn't want to touch it unless it was absolutely necessary. During this time, my husband would still come home and freely enjoy the meals I prepared, despite not contributing to our living expenses. As my belly started to swell, He showed no concern, and he frequently mentioned working overtime and taking on weekend shifts, often leaving the house and completely neglecting all household chores. Although divorce had crossed my mind many times, I thought to myself, maybe Jonathan will change his mind when he sees the kid's face. I also don't want to act selfishly and take the child's father away. I continued to endure this kind of life, and one day, when I was 8 months pregnant, something unexpected happened. I received a sudden phone call from Michelle, a former colleague and friend. "Hello, Serena. How have you been?" "It's been a while, Michelle. Thanks to you, I've already 8 months pregnant. I'm doing well." Though I was exhausted from my busy work and frugal life, I replied cheerfully. Then, Michelle invites me to have a cup of tea after a long time. I agreed with that, wanting to let off some steam. 2 days later, we met up at the cafe and were happy to see each other again. As we enjoyed some cake, Michelle hesitated and began with a difficult topic. "You know, Serena, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but..." "Huh? What, Michelle? How are things going with Jonathan lately?" I was at a loss for words, and Michelle showed me something on her phone. It was a photo of Jonathan and an unfamiliar woman appearing close in an empty company meeting room. "What's this?" "Well, there's been some talk at work about Jonathan and Julia, this female colleague." Michelle's story went like this. A young female employee named Julia joined the company a year ago and became Jonathan's subordinate. Over time, rumors began to circulate about their closeness, such as they went for a business meeting and didn't return for a long time, or they were seen getting close in the office. The photos Michelle showed me were circulating around the office. Is Jonathan having an affair? It's still just a rumor, and I don't have concrete evidence. I'm sorry for telling you this while you're pregnant, Serena. I was in shock, but appreciated Michelle's concern. She continued, Julia here actually seems to be doing well these days, bringing brand name bags to the office. Oh, really? You might want to check the financial aspect once. There are even rumors that Jonathan is financially supporting her. Yeah, I understand. I will check it out. The rumors that started circulating within the company coincided with a period when I was experiencing morning sickness. Julia, the woman who benefited from Jonathan after he stopped providing for my living expenses. There is undoubtedly a connection. After thanking Michelle and parting ways, I hurried home to check our joint bank account. To my shock, the checking account had decreased by about $15,000. Over the past 6 months, there have been several instances where Jonathan withdrew thousands of dollars. Trembling, I put the checkbook away and checked the balance in my bank account from my single days online. What I saw left me in shock. The $50,000 I once had saved had dwindled to $25,000. What's more, there were withdrawals from 2 months ago that I couldn't account for. At that moment, I felt something inside me snap. He not only stopped providing for our living expenses, but also touched my savings for my single days. I won't forgive this. I will make him pay dearly. I vowed revenge against Jonathan at that moment. I then changed the PIN of my account and took steps to prevent further withdrawals. However, I decided not to confront Jonathan directly, but rather to gather evidence. I spent what little money I had left on hiring a private investigator to look into his activities. 2 weeks later, on a certain night, in a shady motel parking lot in the middle of town, I sat quietly in Jonathan's car, which he had parked there. Before long, Jonathan and Julia got into the car. Jonathan, unaware of me in the back seat, attempted to start the engine. And in that moment, I whispered to him like this. You seems to be having quite a bit of fun, didn't you?
Gah!
Jonathan jumped in surprise. Julia, too, froze and looked my way.
Serena, why are you here?
I knew you two were here together, so I decided to lay in wait. What were you two doing together? In a stern voice, I inquired, and Jonathan's eyes darted around.
Well, a junior colleague at work wasn't feeling well, so I was just accompanying her.
At Jonathan's feeble explanation, I threw a bunch of photos at him. In those photos were numerous pieces of undeniable evidence of their affair. There was no way to deny any of them.
What the hell? You investigated me?
Of course. You thought you could deplete people's savings and I wouldn't find out? Now, admit it with your own mouth. Reluctantly, Jonathan began to speak. My severe morning sickness had made it impossible for me to be intimate during that time, which is when Jonathan's relationship with Julia began. He had been buying things for Julia, who was younger and good at sweet talking, indulging her desire. Oh, I see. I understand now. Did this man also buy that designer bag for you, Julia? Julia held the designer bag in her hands with a pale face. Well, this is... You're an adult, so you should know what happens when you get involved with someone else's husband, right? I will demand compensation from you. Be prepared. Julia slumped in disappointment. Then Jonathan stammered as he spoke.
We are not getting divorced, right? And a child is on the way. I won't do something like this again, I promise.
I glared at Jonathan and shouted as I cut him off. There is no way that's happening, you fool. I'm divorcing you. And I'll definitely demand compensation for the affair and child support. You will return the money you spent, even if it means going to court.
What?
Jonathan turned pale and stammered. That's when I dropped another bombshell. By the way, it seems like both of you are doing indecent things during working hours, right? I've already sent proof of that to your company.
Huh? If you do something like that...
Look forward to your consequences, you scum. Both of you are going to hell. In this way, I left them in a state of panic, got out of the car, and left the scene. Later on, Jonathan and I got divorced. I demanded compensation for the affair and repayment of the money he spent from my single days. Jonathan paid it, and his savings were completely wiped off. We agreed on child support payments to be made monthly. As a result of my report to the company about their affair during working hours, Jonathan and Julia were both fired from their jobs. I also demanded compensation from Julia. Julia had to sell her designer items, but it still wasn't enough, so her parents helped her financially. Her parents were furious and forcibly took her back to their hometown. This marked the complete end of Jonathan and Julia's relationship. Jobless and broke, Jonathan joined a part-time job at a horror-themed park and worked as a costumed performer to find a new job. I hope he reflects on what he has done and lives the rest of his life responsibly. On the other hand, I safely gave birth to a lovely baby girl and returned to my parents' home. My freelance work is going well, and it seems I can manage to raise my daughter on my own. My daughter is growing up, receiving love from both my parents and friends like Michelle. From now on, I'd like to live cheerfully and look forward to my daughter's growth.
As soon as my husband left for a business trip, my 6-year-old daughter begged, "Mom, please divorce Dad." I was stunned and fled with her.
I'm off now.
Have a good trip and take care. Starting today, my Terry is going on a business trip for 3 days. As usual, I saw him off at the front door. The only thing different from usual is that our daughter didn't come to see him off. Until not too long ago, she used to come to see him off at the front door just when he was going to work. For some reason, my daughter hasn't been showing up these days. I know it's a little early, but is that girl going through puberty? As I returned to the living room, my daughter suddenly opened her mouth to me with a serious expression on her face.
Mom, please, divorce Dad.
Huh? What are you saying?
Please, Mom.
Seeing my daughter on the verge of tears, my heart felt like it was about to burst. Understanding the meaning of her words, I made a decision on the spot. This can't go on like this. I will protect this child and make her happy. With determination, I immediately fled with my daughter. My name is Miriam Atkinson, and I'm 35 years old. I work in an IT company while also juggling the role of a part-time mother. I married my husband Terry 7 years ago. After we registered our marriage, we moved into an apartment that my father-in-law had purchased for us. Shortly after that, I became pregnant, and our daughter was born the following year. Our daughter Haley recently turned 6. She grows bigger each day, and I couldn't be happier. Haley is a huge fan of her dad. He leaves the house every morning at 6:30, and it has become a daily routine for Haley to wake up by that time to see him off.
Dad, take care.
Wearing pajamas and with a beaming smile, Haley clings to her father. My husband seems to be delighted with this routine, and he always hugs our daughter affectionately.
Haley, Dad will miss you, but I have to go.
Okay, good luck at work. Please come home early today.
I wonder. Daddy's been busy with work lately, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to play with you as much as I'd like, okay?
No, I know Dad is working hard, so I can be patient.
You're amazing, Haley. Haley, do your best at school too.
Okay, I have an English test today, so I'll do my best.
Every morning, this heartwarming conversation between husband and daughter unfolds. Such ordinary days were my happiness, but recently there's one thing that worries me. Lately, my husband has been coming home late. His company always had occasional overtime, but lately it's been more frequent, and he comes home late often. We used to have dinner together, but nowadays, most of the time, our daughter and I eat alone. On this day, as I was preparing dinner, my daughter Haley spoke to me in a hushed voice.
Hey, Mom, is Dad coming home late again today?
Yes, it seems that way. Dad's been really busy with work. But you know, Dad is working hard for you and Mommy, Haley.
Yeah, I understand. But I want to be with Dad more, like before.
You're right. It's lonely. We haven't been able to go out lately.
Yeah.
Over the past few months, my husband has been working late and often working on weekends as well. He's been tired from consecutive overtime and weekend work, and on his days off, he tends to just relax the whole day. Our daughter, perhaps out of consideration for her father, never says things like, "I want to go out," or "I want to play in front of him." She probably understands that her father works hard every day and comes home tired. While I'm grateful for the kind child she has become, it means she's had to endure a lot. Thinking that it's not good for our daughter to continue like this, I decided to discuss it with my husband. On a Friday night, at the end of the week, I stayed awake and waited for my husband to come home. I fought off drowsiness, and after midnight, I finally heard the sound of the front door opening. My husband entered the living room and was surprised to see me.
Huh? Miriam? Did you wait for me to wake up?
Yeah, I have something I want to talk about.
Something you want to talk to me about?
Yes, I'm sorry to bother you when you're tired. But it's about Haley. Mentioning our daughter's name, my husband sat in front of me with a serious expression.
Is something wrong?
I immediately began the conversation with my husband. You see, today, Haley told me that she wants to spend more time with you. She usually acts cheerful, but I think she's really feeling lonely.
Is that so? Well, I feel bad about it. I've been making her feel lonely because of my busy job.
It's not your fault, Terry. Besides, Haley understands that your job is tough. That's why she doesn't say anything in front of you.
You're right. All right, I got it. Let's go out together next Sunday.
Really? Thank you, Terry. Haley will be so happy. Following my husband's suggestion, we decided to go out next Sunday. When I told our daughter about it the next day, Haley's eyes sparkled with joy.
Really? Going out? With Dad? The three of us?
Yes, that's right. Dad is going to take us somewhere.
Yay! I want to go to an amusement park, an aquarium, and a zoo.
Well, let's choose one of them. Anywhere you want to go is fine.
Okay, I'll think about it.
After a week of contemplating, our daughter chose the aquarium. On the day of our outing, the three of us headed to the aquarium in the neighboring town. How many years has it been since I last visited an aquarium? I go through the tanks in order one by one, watching my daughter's happy face. Since my husband and I both work, we let our daughter have a child-friendly smartphone. Haley happily took pictures of the fish with her smartphone. As we finished looking at the first section, my husband suddenly spoke up.
Sorry, Miriam.
He somehow had a guilty look on his face. What's wrong? I asked, and Terry whispered to me so that our daughter couldn't hear.
The company called me and they want me to come to the office right away.
Huh? Right now?
Yeah, well, if I've been called in by my boss, I can't really refuse, can I? I'm sorry, but both of you can take the train home.
But what should I tell Haley? We finally gotta go out together today.
There's no other way, is there? Can you handle it skillfully, Miriam? Well, see you.
My husband hurriedly left the scene to avoid being seen by our daughter. As I pondered what to do, our daughter, who had been walking with her eyes on the ground, suddenly turned around energetically.
Mom, what's going on? And where's Dad?
I thought about lying, but a makeshift lie would only get me caught. Besides, my daughter is already in elementary school and can understand adult words. I took my daughter to the side of the aisle, crouched down to her level, and began to speak. I'm sorry, Haley. Dad received a call from work and they want him to come in right away.
Huh? Work? But today was supposed to be our day out.
It's a very important job, and Dad is the only one who can do it.
Does that mean Dad is amazing?
Yeah, that's right. Dad is a remarkable person who can be relied on when things get tough. Perhaps she was very pleased with those words as her expression, which had been gloomy until then, suddenly brightened. Afterward, while happily saying, Dad is so cool, she continued to visit the aquarium. It seemed that she was very tired, as Haley fell fast asleep on the train ride back. While looking at her adorable sleeping face, I couldn't help feeling a little sorry. Even though she had interpreted it in a positive way, she must have felt lonely. Right now, the three of us should have been making dinner together. I understand that his job is busy, but I wonder if this situation will continue like this indefinitely. Despite my husband's best efforts, my anxiety inevitably takes precedence. How long will these days like this continue? Will I have to make our daughter feel lonely for the foreseeable future? Thinking about such things made my chest feel somewhat heavy. However, there's nothing I can do right now. The only thing I can do is to spend more time with my daughter and try not to make her feel lonely. I promised myself that I would spoil my daughter as much as my husband did. 1 week later, as usual, I saw off my husband at the entrance before going to work, but our daughter didn't come at all. She didn't respond when I called her name, and it seemed she was holed up in her room. Perhaps because he couldn't see our daughter, my husband left for work with a somewhat lonely expression. After seeing him off, I called out to my daughter in her room. "Haley, I told Papa, but was it okay that we didn't see him off today?"
Yeah.
"I see. Breakfast will be ready soon, so come to the living room when you're ready."
Okay.
She doesn't have her usual cute smile and wears a somewhat troubled expression. During breakfast, I tried asking if something had happened, but my daughter didn't open up. Even after 2 weeks, my daughter remained in low spirits, and our conversations became significantly less frequent. Previously, she used to talk to my husband as well, but now it seemed like she was avoiding him. Then, one day, my husband had to go on a 2-night, 3-day business trip.
She's not coming to see me off today, is she?
With a hint of loneliness in his voice, my husband made that remark, and I did my best to encourage him. "I'm sure by the time you return from your business trip, Haley will be back to her usual self."
Do you think so? I hope so.
"So, Terry, do your best on your trip. Don't worry about us. And don't forget to bring souvenirs, okay?"
I will. Well then, I'm off.
"Take care and have a safe trip." I saw off my husband at the entrance as usual. However, my daughter didn't show up at all. It's a bit early, but I wonder if she's going through puberty. I returned to the living room, thinking carefree thoughts. Then, my daughter suddenly spoke to me with a serious expression.
Mom, please, divorce Dad.
"Huh? What are you talking about?"
Please, Mom.
With my daughter looking like she could burst into tears at any moment, my heart ached. This is not something simple. I firmly believe that, and gently asked my daughter, placing my hand on her shoulder. "Haley, what's wrong? Why are you suddenly saying something like this? Did something happen?"
Listen to this.
"Huh?" What my daughter handed me was her usual child-sized smartphone. Even though it is for children, it can take photos and videos and has an audio function. My daughter showed me one video. When I replayed the video, I found that it left a shocking image.
It's okay. She hasn't noticed. My wife is oblivious. She'll never realize it for sure. The last time I visited, we actually went to the aquarium as a family. But family outings are so boring. I'll make sure to get her savings, and then I'm divorcing her. I only love you, Erica.
The video was secretly taken from the living room entrance. My husband had his back turned to me, sitting on the sofa and talking on the phone. Judging by the conversation, he seems to be involved in an affair with a woman named Erica. Even though she's young, my daughter sensed what was going on. "Haley, I don't know how this is possible."
I woke up in the middle of the night and I heard Dad's voice. I wanted to say welcome back, but Dad was on the phone with someone. I took this to let you know that Dad is lying.
I see. I'm sorry, Haley. You didn't want to hear this, did you?
Yeah, and I just started disliking Dad. I want to be with just you, Mom.
Haley. I held my daughter tightly and kept apologizing. At the same time, my hatred for my husband grew. This can't go on like this. I will protect this child and make her happy. I packed our things while my daughter got ready, and then I packed the essentials into a suitcase. Holding my daughter, I immediately made my escape. We headed to my in-laws' house, which was about an hour away by train. Since my own family lives in Alaska, traveling can be quite challenging. I have a close relationship with my in-laws, and they have always treated me as if I were their own daughter. They were taken aback and confused when I and my daughter suddenly arrived unannounced, but I was straightforward and told them the truth. Terry is having an affair. My words left my in-laws wide-eyed, and they exchanged glances. Then my daughter handed her smartphone to them and played the video I mentioned.
What is he doing?
The room filled with anger. My father-in-law turned red, and my mother-in-law trembled with fury. My in-laws dote on their first grandchild, and they are furious about what their granddaughter had to go through. My father-in-law offered to transfer the purchased apartment and began the paperwork immediately. They allowed me to send all of my husband's belongings to their house, so I quickly returned to the apartment and had all his things delivered to my in-laws' place before he came back. 2 days later, while having dinner at home with my daughter, there was a loud noise at the front door. However, we had already changed the locks, so my husband couldn't enter. He continued to ring the intercom persistently, and then my phone started receiving a barrage of calls. Because he was so insistent, I reluctantly made my way to the front door. With a chain lock in place, I opened the door to find my husband, his face red with anger, shouting at me.
Hey, why want the door open? What did you do?
What did I do? I just changed the locks, that's all.
Huh? Why would you do something like that? I won't be able to get in.
Well, I don't intend to let you enter this apartment ever again.
What? What are you talking about? This is our home, isn't it?
Sorry, but this home is in my name now. Your father changed the ownership. Unexpectedly, my husband stood in front of the door, baffled by the facts. Then our daughter appeared from the living room. When Terry saw Haley, he extended his hand through the gap in the door with a forced smile.
Haley, please tell Mom. I'm having trouble not being able to enter the room.
Then my daughter gave him a cold look.
You don't have to come in, because you're not Dad anymore.
Haley, what's happened to you? Did Mom say something to you?
Didn't Dad lie? He told someone else that he loved them, right?
My daughter took out her own smartphone and silently thrust the video in question at him. When he saw it, Terry's face turned pale.
Why? Why this video? I mean, it's not what you think. It was just some kind of game.
Clearly, his face contorted, and his voice grew quieter. Seizing the moment, I expressed my anger. A game? I don't want to hear excuses. Do you have any idea how much we've suffered because of your police actions? I believed in you for so long. But it turns out all your overtime and business trips were lies, right? Even Haley knows everything now. And you still plan on making excuses?
Please, forgive me. I'll end my relationship with her.
I don't care about that. Haven't you figured it out yet? Haley and I no longer consider you family. Using this evidence of your affair, I'll squeeze alimony out of you and your lover. Get ready, because you and that woman are going to hell together. Ignoring my husband, who looked like he was about to cry, I firmly closed the door. For a while, there was the sound of someone knocking on the door from outside, but it soon stopped. Later, I received a message from my in-laws saying that my husband had come to them seeking help. Of course, they had no intention of helping him and promptly sent him away. He had nowhere else to go, so he ended up crashing at his lover's apartment. The reason this became known is because the affair partner contacted me and exposed the relationship herself, saying, "The story is different." She even went to the trouble of sending me pictures as proof of the affair, as if she was trying to harass me. Based on that, I requested legal assistance for a divorce from my husband. Because of the alimony payments, Terry and his cheating partner's lives are changed forever. Now they blame each other and fight every day. Moreover, the affair partner used to be a receptionist at my ex-husband's company. Their relationship got exposed at the company, leading to the immediate termination of the affair partner's contract, and Terry got moved to a less promising department, ending his chances of promotion. It doesn't seem like they have a bright future ahead of him. On the other hand, I'm still living with my daughter in the apartment my father-in-law purchased for me. My daughter doesn't seem to be sad, but rather she appears more lively than before.
Mom, on the next day off, I want to go to the amusement park.
It's true, we haven't been there in a while. All right, let's go.
Yay! Will you buy popcorn too?
Of course. And should we get matching headbands?
Sounds good. Let's wear them together.
Since that day, it feels like my daughter and I have become close friends. I hope we can continue to overcome many challenges together in the future.